back to Eve and Dania's podcast. So for today's episode, we're gonna talk about literature. Why?
Because we're English literature
Students.
students.
And for today's episode, we're gonna talk about two different poems for our assignments, which is aspects of poetry last assignment. Yay!
So today, we'll be discussing two poems from different thematic categories. Home by Worcestershire and also Suicide in Trenches by Siegfried Sassoon. So although these poems come from different historical and cultural contexts, they are very connected through their exploration of violence and its impact on human lives.
So basically, Home focuses on migration and displacement, particularly the experiences of refugees forced to flee their homeland. Meanwhile, Suicide in the Trenches explores the devastating psychological effects of war on soldiers during World War I.
Yeah. So our main argument is that both poems demonstrate how violence destroys a person's sense of belonging. But however, Home presents physical displacement through forced migration, while Suicide in the Trenches presents psychological displacement caused by trauma and war.
I see. Have you read both?
Yeah.
Oh,
For this
yes.
assignment, of course.
Of course, me too. So, to explore this argument, we will first examine each poem individually before moving into a deeper cross-thematic discussion using tone and persona shift. So, before discussing the poem itself, it is very important to understand Worcestershire's background. So, Shire is a British Somali poet whose parents fled Somalia because of the civil war. So although she grew up in London, her work frequently explores themes of migration and also identity and displacement. So the poem was published during the global refugee crisis and became widely recognized for giving a voice to refugees. One of the poem's most powerful images appears immediately in the opening line, which is "Home is the mouth of shark." So this extended metaphor completely transforms the traditional idea of home. So normally, home symbolizes safety, comfort. However, Shire compares it to a predator. Yeah,
I think that's really important because it immediately challenges the stereotype that refugees leave their countries voluntarily. So the metaphor here suggests that remaining at home is actually more dangerous than leaving. So instead of moving towards opportunity, refugees are just escaping destruction.
Oh my god. So another important device is the personification.
Yeah.
Shire writes, "You only leave home when home won't let you stay." Home becomes an active force that pushes people away. So this creates a sense of betrayal because of the place that should provide us protection and safety is now rejecting its own people.
And to add on to what you just said, I think that rejection here, it also creates emotional displacement as well as physical displacement. So the refugees, they don't just lose a place, they lose their connection to identity, memory, and also belonging.
And the poem also uses irony. It's when she said, "No one puts their children in a boat unless what?"
The water is safer than the land.
The water is safer than the land. So water normally represents danger, yet the conditions on land have become even worse. So this highlights the desperation of the refugees.
Yeah. But to add on as well, for me, another powerful symbol in the poem is that is the passport.
Yeah, the passport.
Because Shire combines symbolism with vivid imagery in the line, sobbing as each mouthful of paper. So the imagery here, it allows readers to visualize the speaker physically tearing and swallowing their passport while crying. So this painful act highlights the emotional trauma of leaving one's homeland behind. And at the same time, the passport functions as a symbol of nationality, identity, and belonging. So by destroying it, the speaker is not only discarding a document, but symbolically severing their connection to home. So basically, the combination of imagery and symbolism helps emphasize that the refugees are often forced to sacrifice part of their identity in order to survive.
Oh my god, that's actually so sad. And like, I think that's what makes the line even more like heartbreaking. Yeah, the speaker doesn't even like destroy the passport because they want to forget their homeland, but the speaker like destroy their passport instead. They're forced to give up a part of who they are, like showing that displacement affects not only people who leave but also their sense of identity, right? So finally, the poem uses repetition through the recurring phrase of no one leaves home, no one leaves home, no one leaves home. So this repetition reinforces the central message that migration is not actually a choice. It is an act of survival, you know?
So for the suicide in the trenches, so we'll move on to the suicide in trenches by
The
Sissoon
second poem,
itself.
guys.
So basically, Sissoon was a British soldier who fought during World War I, and he later became one of the most outspoken anti-war poets of the period. So unlike patriotic propaganda that glorified war, Sissoon focused on its psychological and emotional consequences. So here, the poem, it begins with, I knew a simple soldier boy. So the word simple here immediately establishes innocence. This soldier represents an ordinary young man who was sent to war.
You know what I find interesting? What I find interesting is that the Sassoon deliberately avoids making the soldier like heroic, you know, not romanticizing and all, but instead he presents them as someone ordinary and also like vulnerable.
Yeah, exactly. The first stanza describes the soldier as cheerful and carefree. So in the line, grinned at life in empty joy and whistled early with the lark, these specific images create a very peaceful and innocent picture of youth before war.
Okay, but that innocence completely disappears in the second stanza. The soldier becomes cowed and glum. So the contrast between his early happiness and also the later despair highlights war's psychological damage. And another important line is, with crumbs and lies
and lack of rum.
Yeah, lack of rum. So here, the Sassoon uses polysyndeton through the repeated use of the word and this makes the list of the hardships seems endless and overwhelming. The soldier is constantly surrounded by explosions, unsanitary conditions, and a lack of comfort or relief. So the accumulation of these struggles all reflects the harsh realities of trench warfare and helps the readers understand the mental strain soldiers has endured on a daily basis. So as a result, the soldier's cheerful and also carefree personality gradually deteriorates under the pressure of the war itself, you know.
Yeah, I think that's important because Sissoon isn't showing one dramatic event that causes the soldier's death.
Yeah.
But instead, it's the constant suffering and psychological exhaustion that slowly wears him down with time. So the poem then reaches its most shocking line. He put a bullet through his brain. So what's striking is how direct Sissoon is. There is no romantic language or heroic description. The blunt diction here forces readers to confront the devastating psychological consequences of war and highlights how trauma can push ordinary soldiers beyond their limits.
And also that directness forces the readers to actually like confront the consequences of the war. And the enemy here isn't like it's not another soldier, it's like the trauma. Another significant line appears immediately after the soldier's suicide, which is no one spoke of him again. And the blunt diction is particularly powerful because Sassoon describes the aftermath of the soldier's death in such a simple and also like emotionless way. Yeah. And the line suggests that society quickly forgets the individual soldiers once they die. So despite the tragedy of his suicide, he becomes just another casualty among thousands lost during the war. And this highlights how war not only destroys lives but also erases personal stories and identities, reducing soldiers to statistic rather than human beings.
Yeah, I think that's what makes the file stanza so critical. Sassoon isn't only condemning the war itself, he's also criticizing the people who ignore its human cost.
Yeah.
He addresses smug-faced crowds who cheer soldiers as they march to war. The phrase smug-faced here creates a very judgmental and accusatory tone, suggesting that civilians are overly confident in their beliefs about war, despite having no direct experience of its horrors. He accuses civilians of celebrating war without understanding the suffering soldiers endure.
So like the final line is especially powerful for me. It says that the hell where youth and laughter go. So here Sassoon uses symbolism to represent the destruction of the innocence. Youth and laughter symbolize happiness, hope, and the carefree nature of young soldiers before they experience war. So by describing war as hell, Sassoon suggests that the battlefield is a place where innocence is why are you laughing about it? Where innocence is permanently destroyed. So this creates a stark contrast with the cheerful soldier introduced at the beginning of the poem and reinforces the poem's anti-war message.
So, although the poem is focused on different groups of people, they share many similarities.
Yep. In Home, refugees lose their homeland. And in Suicide in the Trenches, soldiers lose their innocence and also mental stability. Yeah.
So one poem here basically explores physical displacement and the other explores psychological displacement.
And I think both poems suggest that violence destroys belonging. You know, refugees no longer belong to their homeland, and soldiers no longer belong to the lives they once knew.
Another similarity that I think we can add here is that both poets challenge public misconceptions, because many people assume refugees leave for economic opportunities. Similarly, many civilians during World War I believed war was heroic and glorious.
But both poets here reject those assumptions and expose that the hidden suffering behind them. Yep. And now I think we should move on to the most important part of our discussion. So our chosen framework is the option B, which is tone and also persona shift. So our question is, what would happen if the speaker from Home become the narrator of the Suicide in Trenches? What do you think?
So I think, like, at first these poems may seem very
different.
Yeah,
it is.
One follows refugees, the other follows a soldier, but in my opinion, both speakers are responding to the same issue, which survival. Which is survival.
And in Home, the speaker repeatedly says, no one leaves home unless home is the mouth of a shark, blah blah blah. And this suggests that people only leave when staying becomes more dangerous than escaping, because who would want to leave their home, you know?
Yeah. And I think the same logic can also be applied to Sassoon's soldier.
Yeah.
Instead of asking why he died, we begin asking what he was trying to escape from.
Exactly. The trenches become another version of the shark's mouth for me, because just like the refugees are trapped between danger and also danger at home and also uncertainty abroad, the soldier is also trapped between war and also death. So for me, there is no safe space available to him, you know?
Yeah, that changes how we interpret the suicide.
Yeah.
It becomes less about weakness and more about desperation.
Yep.
Just like refugees flee unbearable circumstances, the soldier here is responding to circumstances that have become impossible to survive psychologically.
Yeah. And do you realize that the tone would also change significantly?
Yeah.
Because Sassoon's speaker is more like angry. And he actually blames society. He criticizes the smug-faced crowds,
Meanwhile, I think Shaya's speaker is very pleading.
Yeah.
Like, she constantly asks readers to understand the refugees' experiences. Her tone is much more desperate rather than accusatory.
Yeah. And if Shire narrated Sassoon's poem, I think readers would probably focus less on blaming civilians and more on empathizing with the soldier. The poem would become a story about survival and suffering rather than public criticism, I think.
Yeah. I think something even deeper happens. The refugee loses a homeland, while the soldier loses his identity. Both become displaced.
I think that's such an interesting connection because the soldier never crosses a border. Yet, psychologically, he becomes just as displaced as the refugees. And he can never return to the carefree boy who once grinned at life in empty joy.
Yeah, in that sense, the soldier becomes emotionally homeless. The refugee loses an external home, but the soldier loses an internal one.
And that reveals the strongest connection between both of these poems. Displacement is not always geographical. People can also become displaced from their memories, happiness, identity, and sense of self.
Yeah, both poems show that violence forces people to leave something behind, whether it is a country or a former version of themselves. The loss is permanent.
Yeah, I think this is a very heavy topic, but now comes the conclusion. Right? So to conclude, both Home and Suicide in Trenches reveal the devastating consequences of violence.
While Home focuses on refugees who are physically displaced, Suicide in Trenches focuses on soldiers who become psychologically displaced.
Through trauma.
Yeah, through trauma.
And through our tone and personal shift analysis, we discovered that both poems are connected by a larger theme. So violence destroys belongings.
So whether someone loses a homeland or loses themselves, both experiences involve displacement and suffering.
So these poems remain relevant today because refugee crisis, war, and trauma continue to affect millions of people around the world.
So I think that's all. Thank you for listening to our podcast.
And we hope this discussion has demonstrated how poetry helps us understand the human cause of violence from different perspectives. So that is all for today's episode. We will see you in the next episode of
Eve and Dania's podcast. Bye! Deeper. What?
I'm sorry. Psychologically, he becomes
Apa gila?